Ladies and gentlemen, when you let go peacefully, something powerful happens, and most people don't understand it until they see it work. Letting go is not weakness. It's not surrender. It's not saying you never cared. Real peaceful letting go is strength under control. It's emotional maturity. It's choosing your dignity over desperation. Letting go peacefully is often misunderstood because many people confuse it with giving up or admitting defeat, when in reality it is one of the strongest emotional positions a person can take. Weakness is holding on out of fear, begging for attention, or staying where your worth is constantly questioned. Strength is being able to step back with composure when something no longer meets you with the same energy and sincerity you bring. Peaceful release is not loud, dramatic, or bitter. It is quiet, steady, and grounded in self-awareness. It says you understand your value without needing applause or validation to prove it. When you let go peacefully, you are not rejecting the other person. You are accepting reality. You are recognizing that love cannot be forced, interest cannot be negotiated, and commitment cannot be pressured into existence. Instead of trying to control someone else's feelings or behavior, you choose to control your response. That decision alone separates emotional maturity from emotional dependency. It shows you are guided by standards instead of impulses. There is also dignity in emotional restraint. Anyone can react when hurt. Anyone can send long messages, demand explanations, or try to make the other person feel guilty. But it takes discipline to pause, breathe, and say to yourself that your peace matters more than your urge to react. This restraint builds inner confidence. You begin to trust yourself more because you see that your stability does not collapse when circumstances change. People who let go peacefully do not see themselves as rejected. They see themselves as redirected. Their mindset shifts from loss to alignment. Instead of thinking, why wasn't I enough? They begin asking, was this truly right for me? That question restores personal power. It moves the focus from external approval to internal truth. Peaceful detachment also protects your emotional energy. Constantly trying to hold on to someone who is unsure drains mental clarity and self-esteem. Releasing calmly preserves your emotional resources and keeps your identity intact. You remain centered in who you are, what you offer, and what you deserve, and you move forward without resentment, without self-betrayal, and without surrendering your standards for the sake of temporary closeness. Chasing someone rarely creates the connection people hope for because pressure changes the emotional atmosphere between two people. When you chase, your actions are driven by urgency and fear of loss rather than confidence and clarity. You start sending more messages than necessary, asking for reassurance too often, and trying to secure attention instead of allowing interest to grow naturally. The other person begins to feel managed instead of appreciated, and even if they liked you at first, the dynamic starts to feel heavy. Emotional pressure makes interaction feel like obligation rather than choice. Pressure also removes mystery and anticipation. When you are always available, always initiating, and always adjusting yourself to keep someone engaged, there is no space left for them to wonder about you. Attraction often grows in space, not in pursuit. People value what they have room to think about, not what constantly demands their response. When every moment is filled with follow-ups and emotional urgency, curiosity has no oxygen. Calm distance, on the other hand, communicates emotional security. It shows that you are interested, but not dependent, open, but not attached to an outcome you cannot control. This kind of distance is not coldness or manipulation, it is balance. You respond warmly, but you do not overextend. You show interest, but you do not chase validation. That balance feels safe and attractive because it signals maturity and self-trust. When you stop chasing, your behavior becomes more natural. Conversations become lighter. Your tone becomes more relaxed. You are no longer measuring every reply time or analyzing every word. This relaxed presence is easier to connect with. It allows the other person to lean forward emotionally instead of leaning back to create breathing room. Attraction works best when both people feel free, not cornered. Calm distance also restores equality in interaction. Chasing creates an imbalance where one person is investing far more energy than the other. Balanced distance invites mutual effort. It silently says that connection should be chosen from both sides, not persuaded from one. That message is powerful because it is demonstrated through behavior, not declared through words. Emotional calm changes how you carry yourself, how you speak, and how you respond to uncertainty, and that steady energy often draws attention more effectively than repeated attempts to hold it. When emotional neediness stops, the entire interaction pattern changes in a way most people don't expect. Neediness is not just wanting someone, it is depending on their responses to feel secure, valued, and calm. It shows up in overchecking messages, reading deeply into small delays, and constantly seeking reassurance about where you stand. Even when the words sound caring, the energy underneath feels demanding. People can sense when they are being treated as someone's emotional anchor instead of a partner by choice, and that weight often pushes them back rather than drawing them closer. Neediness narrows your focus until the other person becomes the center of your emotional world. Your mood rises and falls based on their attention. Your confidence becomes tied to their tone. This creates silent pressure because the relationship starts carrying more responsibility than it was meant to hold. No one wants to feel like they are responsible for stabilizing another adult's emotions every day. When that pressure is felt, instinct creates distance. The moment neediness stops, emotional space opens. You begin responding instead of reacting. You allow conversations to breathe. You no longer rush to fill every silence or interpret every pause as danger. That emotional steadiness is noticeable. It changes how your words land and how your presence feels. Instead of communicating, "I need you to respond," your energy communicates, "I enjoy talking with you." Enjoyment attracts. Emotional dependence repels. Curiosity begins when pressure disappears. When you are no longer trying to secure constant confirmation, the other person has room to wonder about you again. They start to notice your independence, your routines, your priorities, and your calm rhythm. Curiosity grows when they see you are engaged in your life rather than monitoring theirs. Attention becomes voluntary instead of requested. This shift also restores unpredictability in a healthy way. If you are not always the first to reach out, not always the one extending the conversation, and not always the one adjusting, G-plans interaction becomes more balanced. The other person starts participating more actively because the emotional work is no longer being done for them. Investment increases when it is required, not when it is replaced. When emotional self-sufficiency replaces neediness, your presence feels lighter, steadier, and more grounded. And that emotional clarity naturally invites renewed interest and engagement. Silence with dignity carries a message that arguments often fail to deliver because arguments are usually filled with emotion, defensiveness, and the urgent need to be understood. When people argue from a place of hurt, they tend to repeat themselves, exaggerate their points, and push harder for validation. The louder the defense, the less it is truly heard. Words spoken in emotional heat often lose precision and power. They become noise instead of signal. Dignified silence, by contrast, is controlled and intentional. It is not withdrawal out of fear, it is restraint out of self-respect. When you choose dignified silence, you are not saying you have nothing to say. You are saying this situation does not deserve your emotional spillover. You recognize that not every misunderstanding needs a debate, and not every slight needs a courtroom. This kind of silence shows emotional discipline. It communicates that your standards are steady and your reactions are not easily provoked. That steadiness is often more impactful than a perfectly constructed argument. Arguments also tend to shift focus away from the real issue. Instead of discussing behavior and boundaries, people begin defending pride and attacking tone. The original concern gets buried under counter-accusations and emotional scorekeeping. Silence interrupts that spiral. It refuses to feed escalation. When one person stops supplying emotional fuel, the fire has nothing to grow on. The dynamic changes immediately. Dignified silence also creates reflection space. When you stop explaining yourself repeatedly and step back calmly, the other person is left alone with their own thoughts and actions. Without your continuous responses to react against, they must face their behavior without distraction. Silence becomes a mirror. It lets consequences speak without decoration. Many realizations happen in the quiet that never happen in debate. There is also strength in not trying to control the narrative. Arguing often comes from the desire to manage how you are perceived. Dignified silence shows you are secure enough to let your consistent behavior represent you over time. You trust that truth does not need constant defense, that confidence is felt even when no words are spoken. Calm silence preserves composure, protects emotional energy, and demonstrates self-command in moments where emotional reaction would be easier. And that controlled quiet often delivers a clearer message than repeated attempts to win a heated exchange. Choosing your peace is not passive. It is an active decision to protect your emotional stability, your time, and your self-worth, even when strong feelings are involved. Many people think proving value requires constant effort, constant availability, and constant accommodation. They believe the more they give, the more they will be appreciated. But overgiving without boundaries often hides your value instead of revealing it. When you are always adjusting, always forgiving without change, and always staying despite discomfort, your presence becomes expected rather than respected. When you prioritize peace, your choices begin to reflect standards instead of fear. You stop tolerating confusing behavior just to avoid being alone. You stop accepting inconsistent communication as normal. You stop negotiating with situations that repeatedly drain you. This shift is quiet but visible. People notice when you no longer argue to be understood, when you no longer chase closure from those who avoid accountability, and when you no longer stay where your nervous system is constantly unsettled. Peace-driven decisions naturally create boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They determine what is allowed into your emotional space and what is not. When boundaries are clear and calmly enforced, your value becomes measurable through access. Not everyone gets the same closeness, the same time, or the same emotional availability. That selectiveness signals self-respect. It shows that your energy is not public property. Value becomes visible through contrast. When you are always present, no matter how you are treated, there is no contrast to highlight your worth. When you step back from disrespect, inconsistency, or emotional chaos, the contrast appears immediately. Your absence of tolerance reveals your standards. Your refusal to engage in draining patterns reveals your maturity. Your calm withdrawal from unhealthy dynamics highlights the stability you brought into them. Choosing peace also changes how you carry yourself in daily interaction. Your tone becomes steadier. Your responses become more measured. You listen more and react less. You do not rush decisions just to relieve tension. This grounded presence communicates confidence without announcement. Others experience you as centered rather than seeking approval. Self-directed peace removes desperation from your behavior and replaces it with clarity. And that clarity allows others to see your worth through your limits, your calm decisions, and your unwillingness to trade inner stability for temporary